Destiny's Renegades is doomed to fail before it's even launched is an absolutely spicy title. I had to see what we're cooking up over here.
I spend my time deep in the lore of Destiny, and this is desperate from Bungie. While having so much respect for the narrative team, I've never seen the history and lore being shoehorned as deliberately into an external franchise trope before, and honestly, it leaves a really bad taste in my mouth. In this video, I wanted to show you...
This is a brutal take right here, I can already tell. We're talking about shoehorning the Star Wars themes into an expansion, and I think that the idea behind this is this because Bungie are genuine super fans of Star Wars? Or is it just kind of like a money grab type of thing? And I have mixed opinions because I like Star Wars, and I think that some of those themes and weapons are cool as a collaboration. I just think that the intermingling of the story narratives is a peculiar recipe, at least. Bungie doesn't have any creative minds anymore. You can't help but feel like if you are the narrative lead or director, that this is... I wouldn't say soulless. I would say that this is maybe forced or just even unnecessary, because the themes and the tropes of Star Wars are just, they could be used in any story. You don't really need to use the tagline, oh, Star Wars with it, right? You're kind of evoking the name Star Wars as a marketing ploy.
How connecting the Dredgen cult to the Sith is dodgy AF. That saying the Praxic Order is akin to the Star Wars Jedi kind of takes a steaming poop on the actual lore. And what...
Okay, this is really interesting to me because I don't know the lore in Destiny 2 extremely well. So someone that is kind of an expert and comparing the two and being pretty unhappy about it is wild, right? I want to see what Bife's opinion on this would be.
A warlock, Aunor Mahal, wouldn't even touch a Praxic blade, and find out if there's actually any information in the lore about the new Dredgen Veil, who's being introduced for the first time in Renegades. All while seeing if there could actually be a parallel to the Star Wars tropes and what does exist within the Destiny universe. While everyone seems to be talking about low player count, sword glitches, and insane power grind, I try to keep myself up the butthole of the lore, where I'm more comfortable. Bigger story, and all the micro facts buried in the game. In my last video, I talked about the dramatic drop in lore books being delivered compared to any other release in the history of Destiny.
Damn, we even getting less lore out here? Oh, come on. We're getting less content, less activities, no strikes, and we're even going cheap on the lore. That's messed up.
How we're getting less flavor texts, less armor texts, and just general less context of the world we love to play in. I try to keep my opinions to myself, mostly, and just stay in the lore, where it's safe and comfortable. But the next expansion has to be called out for being a clear cash grab and forcing the massive, rich and valued Destiny, history and legacy to bend over to the Star Wars tropes. I think it's fair to start with the Renegades reveal stream. And while the gameplay looked cool, the underpinning story gave me heartburn. During the stream, we saw a Guardian for the first time on screen, and I'm pretty sure that's Aunor Mahal. It's great that we get to see human warlock Aunor Mahal for the first time in-game. And honestly, I'm a little excited to see her. Obviously, it's not confirmed yet, but it most likely is her, as we see her Cormorant seal on her chest armor, and she is the most prominent member of the Praxic Order and the Hidden, and we've met her a few times in the lore books previously. We know that Mahal is a zealot. She's obsessive about her work of rooting out darkness as part of the Order. And she's proven that she will go to any lengths, even going around the Vanguard and Ikora, to achieve her goals, if needs be. We even know she's thrown a train at a group that stole her ghost, and she looked to have Drifter taken out a few times.
Alright, she's got some behavioral problems, clearly.
Being crazy suspicious of the darkness connections and the influence over other Guardians that he has. Her ghost is Bahagari, and she's also a member of Ikora's Hidden. To me, trying to rewrite the clear nature of the Praxic Order as the Jedi Order feels so fucking forced, especially without any previous lore work being done or detailing as to why they have fundamentally ignored their core doctrine. While both the groups are focused on light or good, how they do things and the methods they use diverge significantly from the traditional, standard, peaceful Jedi trope. Take a look at the core ideals of the Praxic Creed. It's strong.
Oh god. Oh, here we go. We're getting into the details here.
Strongly mandates that people should not be concerned about the nature of darkness and should instead fight it. They're originally formed to keep artifacts of darkness away from guardians and anyone else to help prevent corruption, or you could say enlightenment. They are explicitly against studying anything darkness. The Order detains guardians, imprisons ghosts, they have technology to do so, and re-educates them. And some guardians are known never to have returned from the Praxic Order imprisonment.
Jeez, they got fucking conversion therapy over here. Holy crap.
To this very day, Aunor Mahal herself has consistently maintained her hardline stance, even after the Vanguard allowed guardians to wield stasis and strand. This is what kind of irked me about the introduction of the Praxic Blade lightsaber. It feels like an epic stretch to have Mahal donning a blade that would balance light and dark, as she's a zealot that roots out all influences of darkness. The now willingness to use a blade that balances light and dark without any previous build-up or inflection from the lore, or even just laying out why that character just suddenly ignored everything that she has done in her Praxic career. Really feels like...
It is an interesting point he's bringing up here, that someone that's so anti-darkness would use a darkness weapon, but maybe, you know, you gotta use the darkness to beat the darkness. I don't know. It is okay for characters to challenge their own ideas and to evolve in some ways, though. Like, not every character has to be so black and white. So while I do think he has a valid point, we actually haven't seen the story that leads up to why they use this. And maybe there is some reasoning and logic, and, you know, once we get to see it, maybe it will make more sense, right?
A kick in the balls to anyone that has spent the time reading and going back and understanding the lore. That said, if this Praxic Order member actually isn't Aunor Mahal, then I'm being a total tool and just ignore everything I just said about this.
Just as a side note, I definitely think that is Aunor Mahal.
While I'm no Star Wars guy, what is commonly understood about the Jedi Order is that, particularly in their previous iterations, they valued knowledge and understanding of the Force in all its aspects, even if they feared the dark side. Their path was often about philosophy and understanding, turning to conflict only as a last resort. The Praxic Order's dogma of no compromise, no rationalizing, no trying to understand the darkness makes them closer to a religious inquisition or the very dogmatic prequel era Jedi who were blind to their own flaws, as opposed to the wise, balanced keepers of peace. Obi-Wan, Luke. If you're interested in the Destiny lore, the gore, all the microfacts that I tend to dredge up, please feel free to sub, like, comment on this video or others, as it honestly helps me keep more videos being made and supports the channel greatly. And so I can make more of these kinds of videos or other videos in the greater lore of games. Now, back to the Order. The Praxic Order is militaristic. It's a policing organization that operates with zeal. Aunor Mahal has been willing and shown to act outside of the Vanguard jurisdiction, Jesus, and use extreme force, and to pursue the Drifter, even when the Vanguard and the Consensus had a different mandate. While they sometimes opt for re-education over immediate execution, unlike Shin Malphur I could mention, their overall posture has been aggressive and overzealous, to say the least. If you do a deep dive on the Praxic Order, you'll find that their entire mantra of darkness is bad hangs on the dream of a warlock, which was eventually revealed to be a ploy and an inception from the Witness. to slow down humanity's and Vanguard, Lightbearers, Guardians realization that darkness is actually an ability to be utilized, and powers were open to them also. The nuance and detail of this would be railroaded by a shoehorn effect of making these existing organizations fit into the external Star Wars franchise. That Warlock dream was interpreted to be prophetic, and that the darkness was an actualization of evil. It's not just a force of nature, but a moral entity of evil and pure corruption and malevolence. It's the root of all bad things that eventually poisoned the golden age of humanity. That warlock in question, by the way, was called Pujari, and he was a Thanatnaut, a group that purposely courts death as research. He received his vision of the darkness and the Black Garden while drowning at the shores of time. Pujari's art depicted the darkness not just as a storm, but as a change in conduct, suggesting it's primarily evil is an internal corruption of the soul. While currently the lore has complicated this view, the Guardians dealing with balancing light and dark now has evolved the darkness theory into it being a paracausal force, and therefore not inherently evil. But recent events have shown that the witness was a being of pure evil, making Pujari's position feel ironically and retroactively correct about the source of the corruption. The last we heard about Pujari was a reference on a ring with the symbol of Pujari that was found in the Black Garden, having been pulled.
I was just there. This is interesting stuff. I actually haven't studied or read any of the lore in regards to Pujari, but I think that he's making some valid points.
Through time, confirming his final death in the lore. On the other side of that coin is that of the Jedi Council, which is meant to be more diplomatic and
And the other part I would say in regards to like the Jedi Council and how their approach is to philosophy, like worldview basically, is that even though they may have like an overarching view and it might be very different from the Praxic Order, right? You got the Jedi Council comparative to the Praxic Order. Each individual is going to be wildly different from within that, right? Like even within the Jedi Council, the Jedis have differing opinions as individuals, you know? And so I think that someone like, Aunor Mahal being very different doesn't necessarily mean it's a bad thing or that it's wrong,
thinking body. While they served the Republic, their actions were generally viewed as a beacon of law and order on a galactic scale, not merely a domestic policing force for a single city. The Praxic's tendency to act like a rogue force conflicts with the established centralized authority the Jedi were meant to represent. Since the lore books and flavor texts have been dramatically impacted by the downscaling of Destiny as a whole, there's no previous details on any of these factions, apart from them being called Pikers, Totality Division, and the Tharsis Reformation, operating out of the Tharsis Outpost, also a reskinning of a previous location. The Totality Division is noted to be a Scion-run subset of the main antagonist Cabal faction, the Barrent Imperium, with the Scion named Rao acting as their enforcer or lead. Finally, the Tharsis Reformation is a group of clothes-wearing criminal Vex who have been working on the lawless frontier for their own ends.
The Vex wearing clothes looks so ridiculous to me, but I actually kind of like it. I like how different that world looks.
I have nothing to say about these because they're not in lore, they haven't even been indicated that they were ever in lore, and trying to pull them from different sources within the lore feels forced. Some have.
So basically they're creating a lot of new elements, and they're not like building on the previous story that Destiny 2 has developed so well, right? And I think that's maybe the frustrating point for people who are like him, they want to make lore videos and they want to talk about the narrative in Destiny 2. And it feels like instead of building on this like rich lore and history and story, and you could take this story anywhere, like you could literally take the story anywhere you want, we're kind of instead inventing these new people and these new factions, and we're just kind of, forcing them into this narrative. And it's not necessarily that it's going to be bad. It's more just a question of just like, why? It's just more of a question just like, why? Like, why do that? What if we instead, revealed new lore or built on all of the existing story that's been out there.
Try to do that. Apart from a breaking of the Vex through Maya Sundaresh, but again, that was never explicitly said, that they had garnered a full independence and were wearing clothes and shit. There has been one mention of the Cabal, the Barium Imperium, in the lore entry of the Edge of Fate. The entry is a journal-style letter written by Dr. M. Simone Lee to a person named Kyung, with instructions to give the letter to Eris Morn. It's a key source of information on the Barent Imperium, revealing several things. These Cabal have identified themselves as under the Barent Imperium. She speculates that they are former Cabal Ascendancy troops. The guards assigned to her express nasty opinions on Empress Keitel, indicating that they are a faction opposed to the current Cabal Empire. She mentions they're building some sort of weapon while she is working on a station and believes the two are connected. This weapon is implied to be large-scale superweapon, often compared to a Death Star style in the community discussions, and I think that's what they're going for at least. There's also some supplemental lore about them in the book Treacherous Contacts, which details their activities such as ambushing Zur and gathering materials for their weapon. In fact, that's more info that we have for the rest of the underground factions. The only thing that actually draws vaguely from lore is the new House of Spider, led by Spider, which is expected to be involved with Spider likely acting as a key player in the criminal underworld, taking on...
It's got like a Jabba the Hutt vibes, yeah?
A role kind of like Jabba the Hutt style character from Star Wars, which is, in fairness, pretty much how I thought he was originally styled to be, so that's kind of feels like it would.
See, that's already like, you can already see the inspiration taken from this before we even, titled something as like Star Wars inspired. We've already seen similar elements and character tropes and things like that. So this doesn't feel forced. It just feels like that was the inspiration behind Spider in the first place. So of course he would fit into this role.
Be okay. We have been told to expect a new character, a new Dredgen called Dredgen Veil, who is the center point villain and Dark Guardian for this expansion. He's characterized by his conflict with Drifter, whom he imprisoned, we think, and the Praxic Order, whose signature weapon he uses, that Praxic Blade. His origins, speculated obviously, to be either a Praxic Order member of an old or a vengeful associate of Drifter, who knows? In Dredgen lore, the concept of Dredgen began with Dredgen Yor, a corrupted guardian that can be interpreted in quite a few ways when it comes to Rezlazir, and his goal of strengthening humanity by embracing darkness, using any means necessary. However, the modern...
I like this idea, yes.
Shadows of Yor are a much more complex group. Dredgen Veil, Shin Malfor, obviously isn't akin to a Sith, since he's a pawn of the Praxic Order to weed out Guardians using darkness in Crucible, initially anyway, and wherever they are around the solar system. Dredgen Yor's ultimate goal was to strengthen the light by understanding the dark, which runs completely counter to the Sith's desire for dominance and unchecked power. Again, turn this on its side and look at Sith lore. The Sith are characterized by their explicit pursuit of power through the dark side, driven by selfish passion, aggression, and a desire to dominate the galaxy. Their binary force of evil. The subtle, testing, and ultimately protective goals of Dredgen Veil muddy this clear-cut evil comparison, forcing a narrative oversimplification again. There's no way that Bungie doesn't know what it's doing and isn't aware of this uber simplification. Narrative director Alison Lurie...
That's a good point too, because the Sith are like obsessed with power and they're just like, basically just like innately evil, right? Like that's the way we perceive them. It's just pretty different and a pretty strange, comparison between the two.
Has stated that the Praxic Order is very focused on order and law and understanding that there is a binary in our universe of good and evil, and that expansion will poke at that a little bit in a way that suits our story and our world. this suggestion the expansion would use the Star Wars framing as a thematic launchpad to explore the flaws in the Praxic Order's binary worldview. The inconsistency with established lore, Praxics being dogmatic inquisitors and Dredgens being complex testers, may not be an accident, but rather a deliberate narrative tool. The Praxic Order's initial opposition to the player's use of darkness, stasis, and strand, and their absolute condemnation of the Dredgens will force the player to question the Jedi binary they represent. The conflict with a new, simplified, evil Barrent Imperium will likely force the Praxic Order to acknowledge that their methods, or their allies, the player guardian who wields the darkness, may be necessary to achieve the good they seek. I can obviously see that in essence, the Star Wars framing provides a familiar trope, but the established Destiny lore already contains subtle complexities and internal conflict that the Renegades expansion could explore without putting a Star Wars label over it for just
This is true. This is true.
the extra sell. The change in philosophy of the Praxic Order is a long time coming, but it is the forced trope that feels hollow and inauthentically false.
And also, what do we do after this, right? Like, we do the Star Wars thing, which is great and all, but then we're just like leaving all of that behind, right? Like, we're just, then like, that's just all over and done with, and then we're back to like Destiny lore and story? Or do these characters continue to persist for years afterwards? Maybe we defeat them. I guess so. We defeat them, the new Dredgen dies, and we're right back to where we were with Edge of Fate.
In my eyes, anyway. It's clear that Bungie does not have the budget to create mostly new content, and what actual new content there is feels underworked, underloved, and short. I'm aiming that directly at the Heliostatic, the new exotic mission, when I actually say that. If that was marked as a new strike, God knows, getting a new strike? Strike anyone? I think it would have been a success, but it wasn't, so there. Reskinned, recolored.
So you're saying the new exotic mission could have just been a strike, which is actually pretty fair, I would say, based on the size and scale of it.
And reworked is the name of the game of Destiny 2 currently. And it feels like it's let down the opportunity that the history and lore actually offers the player set within the Destiny universe. Personally, I've been underwhelmed by the new 9 focus of Bungie, and now this cash-in tie with the Star Wars leaves me kind of saddened, a little bit broken, as the depth and richness of lore and history in Destiny is so vast, you can create amazing stories that audiences will fucking love without pulling in an external franchise to just to fit characters.
This is exactly my point. There's so much that we could already tap into, you know? Like, let's go to, or at least talk about Torah Bottle, right? So much we could do.
Into a Star Wars universe for another installment, with the rewriting of the core narrative of institutions and characters to fit the Star Wars motif. The loss of vision, of direction, and the unique aspiration seems to have drifted away with the loss of team members and scale of the Bungie team. If this current team doesn't put the time and resources into actually building unique locations, new races, and tie in the lore that feels natural and pre-planned within the context of this franchise, I feel tough times ahead. You do a disservice to anyone who spends their time and their cash diving into the game's history and depth equality and significant backstory, whether it be content creators or just players who just love the game. In other words, Bungie needs to cop the fuck on and start respecting the player rather than just making money for the company, which it very...
Oh my gosh, this is, in my opinion, from what he's saying and from the lore experts, it sounds like this is the narrative people, this is their sunsetting. This is their sunsetting moment, right? They are not happy about this, or at least he's not.
Very much feels that's what they're doing, nothing else. Respect players' time and the cash they willingly spend by stepping up with Destiny stories that drive the universe forward, and not just manufacturing another expansion to drive the cash for the company, as it feels the latter gets more priority than the former. And this is down to Bungie management. Respect the content of the game. It's me. Have a good one.
Wow, this has just been such a pleasure. I'm such a lucky boy. I can't wait to go home.
All right. There it is. That was Destiny's Renegades is doomed to fail before it's even launched from Neff. And honestly, had a lot of really good points. I will say, though, that we haven't seen exactly how Bungie is going to intertwine these narratives. I'm skeptical, but cautiously optimistic that they could pull this off and it could be a fun time. I worry that, we are taking Destiny 2 down the Fortnite route, though, right? Where Fortnite, it's a fun game, don't get me wrong. There's a lot of cool elements to it, but it is kind of a soulless game. Like you're roaming around, the immersion is completely, it was never there to begin with, but the immersion is just bizarre as you roam around and there's like LeBron James and Sabrina Carpenter, and then there's like rappers having concerts, and you're like, are we even in a game anymore? What even is this? This whole thing is just one big ad, And if this is massively successful, I feel like Bungie will try to tap into this. This will be like their break in case of emergency, pursuits. And I just don't want that for the future of Destiny 2 and its story and lore, I think that a good example is there will probably one day be a Halo collaboration, and we don't necessarily need to have those Halo themes and do the same thing with Star Wars and do the same thing with any other, sci-fi stories out there. I think that Destiny has enough of a rich history, story, and lore to build on in and of itself, I should hope so. I mean, they started writing the story for this in 2007. At this stage, you're at almost 20 years. You're at 18 years of writing story for this game. And what, have we just completely ran out of ideas? I don't think so. Shouldn't, at least. Let me know what you think down in the comments below.